social studies books out, and we're going to be looking at A Long Voyage, page 119, 119. Or just as a quick review, you should have been watching the video, which gave you some idea about Christopher Columbus's childhood, maybe how he learned about map making from Bartholomew in Portugal, and how he tried to get money because he had the idea that if he went west, that he would come to India, not realizing that there was two big continents of North America and South America in the way. Also, the fact that he thought the earth was a lot smaller than it actually is. If you remember that most people, the people who study geography, they thought that the world was 23,000 miles around, and he thought it was only 18. So he was off by quite a bit, because the earth is actually almost 25,000 miles. So he was off by 7,000 miles, which means a lot when you're sailing in the ocean, because it's a longer trip. Well, anyway, he went to the king and queen of Portugal, but they didn't have the money to give him, because many of the kings and queens of those countries were fighting each other. So they needed money for their warships and for their soldiers and sailors. And the king and queen of Portugal just didn't have money to send him on a wild goose chase, so to speak. Remember, he wanted a shorter way to get to India and China because of the spices and the gold and the silver and precious metals that those countries had. Remember, no refrigeration, the spices were needed to keep the food from rotting. And of course, the beautiful silks from Japan, and the jewelry, the jewels from those other countries, made it a wonderful place. But of course, it took a long time. It took a long time to get. Remember, we showed on the globe that you would have to go all the way around the continent of Africa. Here's Portugal and Spain, and you would have to go all the way around by ship to get to India and China. It took a long time. They would, of course, stop sometimes along the way to different islands to get fresh water. It may take a year or two, or otherwise there was the land route that you took, that Marco Polo took, going across Europe into Russia and China and India. And Marco Polo, he was gone for a number of years before he returned. And many people read his writings. In fact, you could even read his book today, The Adventures of Marco Polo, when you get a little older, or you could read maybe a child's version of him. And this is what a lot of the geographers and explorers read, which gave them the desire to follow in Marco Polo's footsteps. And then, of course, when Christopher Columbus did it, people wanted to follow him. All right, so we know that after a few years, Columbus went to the king and queen of Spain, and he was able to get money from them. And he got 3 ships. Let me get you the pictures of the ships. Remember, you studied all of this. You studied all of this in October, when we celebrate the discovery of America in October 12, 1492. Here is a painting of Christopher Columbus. Here is a picture of his ships. Okay. And we know he had 3 ships, the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria. Okay. And the Santa Maria was the slowest ship. It probably held all of the food and the cargo. And the Pinta was the fastest. These ships, the number of men were 120. amongst the 3 ships. The cooking was done on a firebox using cooking pots. The sailors slept on the deck, and their food was hard biscuits, dried fish, bread, salted meats. Pigs and chicken were also kept on the ships, which provided the meat and also the fresh eggs. Remember, because they didn't have fresh vegetables, sailors would get a disease called scurvy, which is the lack of vitamin C. And because they were so many months without having any kind of lemons or green vegetables. Okay, so this is the trip. And he left from Spain. He went across the Atlantic Ocean, and he landed in the Bahamas in a little island called San Salvador. All right? Okay? All right, now let's read what it says in your book. Okay, remember the days were long and hard, and let's turn to 119. The ship's sails were raised and the voyage began. The days were long and hard. Weeks went by, but Columbus did not find land. Some of the sailors began to grumble. Grumble means complain. They did not want to keep going. Now, when you're going into unknown territory, you have to be, very careful, because you don't know what you're going to come across. You don't know about the currents. You don't know about the wind. Now, if he landed on San Salvador in October, so at least they traveled during the summer months. But in the summer months, especially here in Florida, we have hurricanes, and they might have come across a few of these very, very bad storms. And remember, their ships ran by wind and in their sails, and if the sails did not carry them along, they were stopped. And calm water, they just didn't move at all. Okay, now Columbus was a little bit discouraged because the sailors were unhappy. All right, let's turn to page 120. So they are traveling. Now they've been at sea for months. And on page 120, Columbus did not want to end the voyage yet. But he decided, now this was maybe providence. Providence would mean God giving him the insight. And he said he would turn back if they did not see land in 3 days. The next day, one of the men spotted land, and the sun had not come up yet. Most of the sailors were still sleeping. "Land!" a sailor yelled, "land!" So, of course, you know that he was very, very excited, and because that was the last thing that he wanted to do was to go back. And you could see how God is in control of even our history. And people can change history with choices they don't really understand. He gave 3 days, here again, the number 3. And he wanted to do something worthwhile, to find a shorter way to get to Asia, which would be China and India. And here was a place that he found where Christianity could be taught. Remember, these people did not know about Jesus Christ. So God did something very, very great. Christopher Columbus not only discovered a new world where Christianity could be taught, or the gospel could be taught, but he also found a place where the people in Europe could have more products that were new to them and were worth more than they would have ever gotten if they had gotten to Asia, which would be China and India and all those other countries in the Far East. First of all, it was a new land where people could spread out and people would be able to own more property. They would be able to live in this vast, vast area of land. So there were so many good things that happened from the mistake of not finding Asia, which was already populated. And here was a golden opportunity. Well, anyway, let's turn to page 121. Columbus did not reach Asia by sailing west. Though Columbus did not know where he landed, God did. Columbus did not know he had found new lands to explore, and God used the voyage to change the world. Let's look at the picture, and you could see Columbus called the people he found Indians, and he claimed the land for Spain. Now remember, he was on a small island in the Bahamas, and he made several voyages back and forth, and these people that he met were not really Indians from India. They were Native Americans. We just call them Indians because that was the term that he used. Okay. All right, so let's turn to page 122 and let's look at what happened and also the difference in the type of ships that were built. Take a look at today and long ago. This is a ship that was used in the days of Columbus. Notice that it was made out of wood. Think about Noah's Ark, and it was made out of wood. And look, it lasted in the rain for 40 days and 40 nights of rain. And it was a wooden ship. So those ships were made pretty well. It says, long ago ships were made from wood. The wood was cut and shaped by hand, and the ship was rolled to the water on a cart. So the ship was made on land and cut from boards, which of course came from trees. And here we have the men splitting the tree trunks and making them into boards. And now look at the ships that we have today. This looks like a battleship, and this is made from steel. So this certainly is a lot more waterproof. But those old ships did what it was supposed to do. It got them across the Atlantic Ocean. Some of the ships were sunk at sea during terrible storms. And even today, people are treasure hunting, because many of those ships going back and forth to Spain and Portugal carried gold that came from this part of the world. And sunken treasure, there are treasure seekers out there. And we have off the coast of Florida several ships that were down by our thunderstorms and hurricanes. And if you go to Key West, I think there's some museums where they show you some of the treasures that were picked up from the bottom of the ocean. People are still looking for these sunken treasure ships that went back and forth from the New World to Europe. Okay, let's look at Columbus Day on page 123. Columbus Day is celebrated on the second Monday of October. It is a day to remember Christopher Columbus and the day he found, and the land he found. It is a day to remember what God did long ago. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So October 12th was the day that he found land, and that's what we remember. I hope you will finish watching the video about Christopher Columbus.